Okay. So for those of you joining us at home or in the community, my name is Courtney. I am the director of Tapestries, which is the memory care community here at United Methodist Communities of Pittman. I am a social worker by background, and I have a lot of experience in senior care, in mental health, and in traumatic brain injury. So basically all things related to the brain. And so I try to use that to help other people understand what's going on with their loved ones. So today we're talking about planning for outings. For those of us who have loved ones with dementia and who want to be able to take them places and do things with them out in the community, so that we can figure out how to do that safely, how to address any challenges that might occur. So first of all, we want to keep in mind that outings are a great tool for our loved ones. There are definitely some obstacles that we need to consider, but getting our loved one out and about is an awesome engagement tool just to keep their mind busy, keep them active. It helps to build cognitive support and resilience, so it can actually help slow the decline of their memory in some cases, and help them build more connections to help keep their brain healthier for longer, which is excellent. Of course, the fun and bonding that comes with it, that can't be understated, that sometimes we have the best time when we step outside of our routine and we take our loved ones somewhere a little different or somewhere a little fun. And then the health benefits, if we're taking them out somewhere to get some exercise, they're walking the park, maybe they're having trouble eating, you're taking them to a favorite restaurant. Just the mood benefits that come from being with people you love and having a new experience that can be helpful for, reducing depression, things like that. So there's a ton of health benefits that come from it as well. We do need to be mindful when we're choosing outings that we are considering the accessibility of locations. We definitely want to take into consideration if our loved ones have walkers or wheelchairs, we want to make sure that there are ample ramps, that there are handrails, and not just in and out of the building or in and out of the parking lot, but also once you're inside, is there a step up to get into a bathroom? Is there a step up to a different level of the dining room? That sort of thing. So making sure that our loved ones can actually access it. And when we're thinking about bathrooms, we want to think about the presence of handrails, and we want to make sure that they're roomy enough that if our loved one needs our help in the bathroom, that we also comfortably fit. Like their wheelchair needs to fit, their walker needs to fit, but we also need to comfortably fit in that room in case they need our support. So accessibility is a big category. We want to consider the time of day and changes in routine. So for those of us who have loved ones who experience sundowning, we know that the later in the day it is, the more challenging outings can be. So we might want to plan for more morning or early afternoon activities. Or we want to stick to activities that support their natural routine. So obviously taking them out is a change, but if it matches up, if you're taking them to the park at a time that they would normally be sitting in, in their backyard, or a time that they would normally be going for a walk anyway, that matches. If we're taking them out for lunch at the same time they would normally eat lunch, that matches anyway. And there still are some changes that are just inherent to the process, but as close as we can get it, the better chance we give them of adapting well to the situation. We definitely want to take into consideration some dignity concerns. Many of our loved ones, especially in the early stages, when they are aware of the changes they're going through, but aren't necessarily in control of the changes they're going through, can be very embarrassed to be out in public. So we want to choose places that they feel comfortable, low pressure environments where they don't have to worry about too much, heavy performance related tasks. Things where they're going to be expected to interact with a lot of people over long periods of time, stuff like that. In the later stages, we want to be mindful of things like if they would be embarrassed about how they look, if they would be embarrassed about eating in front of other people, that sort of thing. If they have incontinence struggles, how are we going to manage that while we're out to reduce embarrassment for them? Those sorts of things. We definitely want to take into consideration their interests and preferences. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. If it's something that they enjoy doing, they're going to have a better time. It's going to make your life easier. Everybody's going to have a better time. And we want to keep in mind memories as well. So particularly in, those early to moderate stages, if we can take them places they're familiar with and they love, it's going to help create conversation, because you can use the setting to stimulate those, those positive memories and talk about all of those things and reminisce. In the later stages, you might find that they have sort of a state dependent memory for some people, where they perform better in familiar environments. And so being in those familiar, comfortable places can actually help them do better. Any thoughts or questions about any of this?
No. Makes
Okay.
sense.
All right. So then when we are getting ready for an outing, we want to make some preparations. I'm a big believer that being proactive is the best way to be successful. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, kind of a situation. So we may want to scout the location ahead of time and consider things like parking and accessibility, and speed of service is a big one for our loved ones with dementia. So I know what we see in our own dining room is if we sit our residents down, tell them it's dinner time, and if there's a delay, even only like 5 to 10 minutes, you can see them getting antsy. And at the 10-minute mark, you can see them starting to get angry and walking out sometimes. And that's, and that's in a really controlled environment. So in a less predictable environment, like a restaurant out in the community, that can be a challenge. So we want to, so maybe you get 2 lunches out for the, for the sake of one kind of a thing, where you're going to go and check out and see how it goes. Maybe you can call ahead and find out what their busy times of day are when they're, when they have a slower flow, where you're going to get better service, so that you can help reduce that. And then we can also be bringing things to do, or kind of mentally preparing things to talk about, to fill those downtimes in those locations, so that we can avoid some of that impatience that can occur. We want to consider the need for adaptive equipment. So again, this might be their walker, their wheelchair, and how easily they can get it in and out of a place. This might be some kind of a folding chair or a stool, or if their walker has a bench, if you're planning on taking them for a walk to the park, maybe they like museums and you want to take them for a stroll around one, that sort of thing. They're not going to have the endurance that they once did, most likely. And so we need to make sure that they have places where they can take rest. If you're going out to meals, do they need any particular eating utensils? For our loved ones that may have tremors or may have limited mobility in their arms, we might want to pack our own forks, spoons, knives that they're used to, that have the built-up handles, or, or the stabilizing technology kind of a thing, so that they have the stuff they need to feel comfortable and successful in that environment. We definitely want to pack a bag. We should include a change of clothes. We should include incontinence products if they use them. Any time-sensitive medications they might need. So if you're taking them out for an evening meal and you know that they typically get a pill, at 5:30, you're going to want to take that with you, so we can keep that schedule consistent. Any as needed medications, if they have pain, if they have anxiety, when you get out in the community and they start to panic, is not the time to realize you didn't bring that pill with you, kind of a thing. So make sure that those are packed. And any comfort items, anything that you notice is soothing for your loved one. For some of our residents, I know that they are never without a cardigan sweater. We've got one gentleman that wears the same jacket, whether it is 30 below or 100 degrees outside, and so that jacket is just a security item for him. He needs it with him. He's always looking for it if it's not there, that sort of thing. For some residents, it's different things. It's a pocketbook or a pair of glasses. Even, it's kind of strange, but even if it's a pair of glasses that isn't the correct prescription anymore, some residents will refuse to change their glasses because these are the ones that they remember and that are familiar. And so you might need to bring the ones they can really see with, but bring the old ones too, so that if they get a little funky about it, they have what makes them comfortable. That sort of thing. So just some strange things to consider, but any comforting items for them that might help to reduce some anxiety. We want to notify any on-site staff if they have any special needs or adaptations. So if your loved one, for example, if you're going to a restaurant and your loved one needs soft foods, needs foods that are, cut up in small pieces, of course you can cut them up to make that a little bit easier. But that may or may not for your loved one be a dignity issue. It may make them feel like a child to have you cutting their food at the table. If that's the case for your loved one, then you can ask the staff to take care of that before they bring the meal out. If they have any food requirements, things like that, if they need a softer menu and they're getting vegetables, let them know they need to steam those vegetables a little longer, sort of a thing, so that they're not chewing on them forever and struggling with that. Modify any materials, for example, menus. I know I'm focusing a lot on eating out. It does seem like that's what most of our families like to do. So I'm kind of leaning heavily in that direction. But menus, especially things like diner menus that have like 15 pages, is just way too much. Or God forbid the Cheesecake Factory. Oh Lord, that menu is like a novel, and I know that for myself with a, quote unquote normal healthy brain, I look at that book and get overwhelmed. Like I will never choose what I want for this. So for our loved ones with dementia, that becomes much more daunting. So that might mean that we peruse the menu and help them find 2 or 3 items that they like, and we just present them with, would you like the chicken parm or the cheeseburger, kind of a thing, and go ahead and narrow out those options. If your loved one is a little further along, or if you have the time and the ability, you might want to print a smaller version of the menu where you've already eliminated the things that they don't like. And maybe even include some photos of the food they do, so that if they don't have the memory retention for the words, they can have that visual cue. So just some different ways that we can modify depending on where our loved one is. I did mention this already, but we do definitely want to bring something to do for downtimes. There's a lot of flexibility in outings, and hopefully we're going to places where there are things to keep us distracted. Maybe there's music, or maybe we're people watching at the park, or, maybe we've gone someplace familiar and we're using that time to reminisce. Ideally, just the act of being out and about is going to help our loved one be more present and active in those conversations, but we can't bank on that. And so we don't want to be committed to, no, I brought this is what we're doing. But we do want to have something kind of on standby if we need it. And then we want to consider in advance how we will handle potential challenges. Challenges can run the gamut from they're impatient or embarrassed and they want to leave. It could be that they had an accident and now we need to find a place to change them. It could be that they said something really inappropriate to someone and now you're in a conflict. We do know that as our loved ones progress through dementia, they sometimes lose their social filter. And so if it pops in their head, it pops out their mouth. And it's not always flattering to the people around us, and so how you handle those challenges, regardless of what they might be, can make or break that outing. So you want to think about, if your loved one says the wrong thing, how are you going to explain that to that person to smooth it over so that they're not offended, or so that, hopefully they don't shout back. If your loved one needs to be changed, how are you going to discreetly get them somewhere where you can, that sort of thing. There are some suggestions that are popular in like the Alzheimer's organization community where they talk about having small cards, almost like business cards printed, that just say very simply, my family member has Alzheimer's or my family member has dementia. They may say or do things that are unexpected. Thank you in advance for your understanding. If that's something that you're comfortable with and that you think might be helpful, that is absolutely something that you can do, where you can discreetly slide that card to, a server in a restaurant, to a tour guide at a museum, to the person at the counter at the store that you go to, whatever the case may be, or even to the person, that they may have said something not so flattering about, like, "Ooh, sorry about that," and just kind of slip them that card. You don't have to make it very personal. It doesn't need to be a lot of detailed information, but it can help ease some of that tension in the moment. I know people feel differently about that. You may or may not want to out your loved one for their, for their condition, and that's okay too. There's really no wrong way. I just know that not all of us are comfortable with conflict, and so that might be a way to reduce it if we feel the need to. Any questions about any of this? Or thoughts?
No, that was an interesting suggestion with the little business cards. I haven't heard that one before. That's very good.
Yeah, I've heard of it before in response to other things. Children with autism. Some brave women have used them for like instances of street harassment, things like that. Hey, this is why what you did was wrong. So I think they're adaptable to a lot of different situations. But while I was going through the Alzheimer's organization site just to make sure that I was thorough in preparing, it was something that they suggested we can adapt to this situation. And so if you're not the kind of person that's comfortable de-escalating a conflict should one arise, or if you don't want to embarrass your loved one by explaining like, oh, sorry, they're making a little bit of a mess, this is why, kind of a thing, that can be a really easy kind of subtle way to do that. All right. So I talked about this a little bit on that first slide, but we want to use routine to our advantage. We want to select times of day and activities that mirror our loved one's usual routine. So if we're taking them out to a meal, do it at a time when they normally eat. If we're taking them out to be active or to be social, we want to do it at the times of day that they are most comfortable being active and social. I can tell you a lot of our residents nap from lunch until about 1:30, 2:30. If you're taking them out for that time between noon and 2:30, you're asking for trouble because that's their downtime. And so we want to respect that. Even things like, they have a favorite show. So for those ladies that have, been consistently watching The Bold and the Beautiful for the last 50, 60 years of their lives, don't plan an outing at that time of day. They're going to be mad they're missing their soaps, that sort of thing. So we want to work on routine, both in terms of having activities that match what they would prefer to be doing at that time, and in terms of respecting times that are off limits to them for whatever reason. I want to choose familiar settings. So I know really popular for some of our gentlemen, if they hunted or fished, is that people will take them to their old hunting grounds or their old fishing lake, drive them through the woods, that sort of thing. For some of our ladies that, that were really active in the community, they'll take them to their, to their women's group location or to their church, that sort of thing. Favorite restaurants, favorite parks. Depending on how one handles it, you could potentially go and do like a drive-by tour of their lives, take them to visit an old home, take them to visit family members' homes, things like that, places that trigger some bells. We do want to pay attention to make sure that we're not triggering distress at those times. If you pull up in front of the old house and they immediately want to get out, people are in the yard, that might be challenging. We want to invite familiar guests or educate guests before we get there. So hopefully you're fortunate enough to have several family members and friends involved in your loved one's care, in which case they should be aware of some of the challenges that your loved one is facing. But the reality for most of us is that family is far away or are busy and can't always be as involved as we are. And so they might have some challenging expectations in terms of what your loved one is capable for or capable of that can create some tension on outings. So if we have out-of-town family members that don't see our loved ones very often, or really busy family members that don't see our loved ones often, we want to let them know ahead of time, hey, just so you know, they're not the same as, they were the last time you saw them. These are some of their struggles. If this happens, this is how you should respond. Or, if this happens and you're not sure how to respond, follow my lead kind of a thing. Even something as simple as telling them, please don't correct them. If they say something that's blatantly wrong, just don't correct them. That's one small piece of advice, piece of guidance that can make a world of difference for our loved ones with dementia, because every time we quiz them on their memory or we tell them, no, that's not right, it tends to make them either get frustrated or withdraw into themselves. And both of those are not great things to have happen, when we're trying to have a good, enjoyable day. So we want to make sure that we're kind of prompting people ahead of time. Just so this is what you should expect and this is what you should do. That can be challenging. If you have family members or loved ones who are consistently in denial about these sort of things, it may be best to have much shorter outings planned with them, so that both for their sake and for your loved one with dementia's sake, you're reducing opportunities for distress. We want to choose activities that we know our loved one enjoys and that are adaptable. So for example, favorite restaurants, but ones that offer finger foods, and so finger food doesn't necessarily mean, they need a child's platter. A sandwich is a finger food, a taco is a finger food. Most appetizers are finger foods. Things that if they struggle with tremors, if they struggle with utensils, they can still eat with relatively little embarrassment. Smaller parks with more benches, if they always were the outdoorsy type, if they always wanted to go for walks, if they just like people watching, that sort of thing. But you had a giant park. So I know, for example, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Washington Lake Park in Washington Township. Gorgeous, beautiful park, but enormous. Few and far between bathrooms, miles of walkways with not a lot of benches. It's not a great recipe for our loved ones who have incontinence issues, who have limited mobility, and who might tire out frequently. We want to take them to somewhere a little bit smaller where they can get that same benefit, have that same familiarity, but have more opportunity for success, where they can sit down if they need to, or they can get to a bathroom if they need to, that sort of thing. And stores with wider aisles. I cannot overstate this. We've all been to stores or even to grocery stores where you're struggling to get through with your basket or your cart, and God forbid there's somebody else in the aisle that you want to be in. It's just not happening. Add a walker, add a wheelchair into that mix, add a cane into that mix, and suddenly it's a much more difficult situation to navigate. And realistically, I wish this were not true, but people tend to be very rude to people using adaptive equipment. I've seen a lot of people in stores that will have very little to no regard for someone in a wheelchair. They'll reach right over them, reach right around them, bump right into them. Once or twice, I've seen people move other people out of the way, which is a horrible thing to do to a stranger. Just like go ahead and grab their wheelchair and move it. Or have nasty comments to make if they're moving slowly, that sort of thing, which, again, creates opportunity for conflict. It creates opportunity for embarrassment. So if we can find places with wider aisles, wider walkways that are going to make it easier to get those adaptive equipment pieces through, that are going to allow for flow of traffic around our loved one if they're slower moving, all of that is going to make everything much more pleasant. Any questions about this? No? Okay. All right. And then this is probably the single most important of everything that we're talking about, is that we want to attend to our loved ones' cues and needs. We want to pay attention to their facial expressions, to their breathing, to their mood, and to their behavior. Often we can see on their face as they're getting more tired, as they're getting more frustrated, as they're getting more anxious or more overwhelmed. And we want to step in and do something to address that as soon as possible. If their breathing becomes labored, whether it becomes short and shallow or rapid, maybe they're doing a lot of yawning that may indicate they're tired. Maybe they're doing a lot of sighing that indicates that they're frustrated, or a lot of huffing and puffing. If their mood suddenly switches and they seem a little more irritable, and of course, if they're acting in a way that's out of character for them, those are all signs that something isn't quite right with the outing. It may be a sign that they have a need that needs to be met. So it might be in the bathroom, you're uncomfortable, and then you can come back and keep it moving. It might be, I'm tired and need a break. It might be that I've hit my limit and need to go home. And those are things that we have to kind of figure out and play by ear as we, get to know our loved one and how they react to certain settings. But if we're ignoring those cues, we're guaranteeing things are going to go south. So we want to make sure that we're paying a lot of attention to what our loved one is telling us, both verbally and non-verbally. We want to make note of any patterns that we notice. So if you take them to a couple of different places and you find that sound, lighting, timing, anything like that seems to set them off, those are good things to be mindful of when you're choosing locations. So I know a lot of restaurants, for example, on weekends will have live music, and suddenly what was a quiet, comfortable restaurant is a really loud, overstimulating restaurant because that sound system is turned up so that everybody can hear over their dining, and then everybody is screaming so that they can hear their table conversation over that sound system, and it creates kind of a cacophony that can be really overwhelming even if you don't have dementia. It's definitely a struggle if you do. Certain types of lighting. So especially for those of us who have loved ones with issues with sundowning, places with natural light tends to be a little bit throughout the day. So like fluorescent lights can be really challenging in the afternoon as they're struggling to identify what time of day it is and kind of adapt to that, and the environment is very static and very sterile, and it's not reflecting their understanding of what's happening. It can be a little bit challenging. Time limits are a huge one. I know it seems to me that as our loved ones go through the process and get to the more moderate and later stages of dementia, most families will say right around the 2-hour mark is when things got different. I don't know what it is about that magical time, but either that's when they start yawning or that's when they start getting a little antsy and a little frustrated. And so if you notice, whatever that time limit may be, an hour, 2 hours, whatever, cut the visit short a little before then. If I know 2 hours is your limit, I'm not going to push you to the 2-hour mark and then have a painful ride home. That's not helping anybody. And so we want to work within that parameter. And anything that helps or hinders. So if you take them to a place and you have a really phenomenal experience, use that, go there more, you know? If you go to a place and there's something there that's not quite right, is that something that you can fix? Is that something that you can work around? And if it's, and we want to have an exit strategy. So an exit strategy doesn't necessarily mean that we have to leave and kind of abandon ship, but it can. So we want to be flexible and we want to have backup plans so that we can adapt to whatever our loved ones' needs are. So in early stages, when our loved one is still relatively, cognitively with it, we're going to start with beloved locations, beloved activities, beloved company, and we're going to follow their cues. Those are the times when it's pretty easy and pretty straightforward for the most part. In the later stages, we might shorten our drives so that we have more time to be at a place. So we're not going to go so far. Your loved one might love the beach, but if that's an hour car ride and they hit the wall at the 2.5 hour mark, is it worth it to go for that hour drive? Maybe you can find like a lakefront beach that's a little closer or something like that. So shorter drives, shorter walks. If you're going somewhere within walking distance, I know we're very fortunate to have a baseball field just across the street from our location. And so for our residents that enjoyed watching Little League games, and seeing their grandchildren play, things like that, that's a great opportunity. It's a really short walk. They can, go there and enjoy it rather than going to a park further away or taking them, to a big baseball game. Whether you're taking them to a Phillies game or whatever the case may be. So shorter drives, shorter walks, places with flexible rooms and options. So, maybe we find that a drive-through is a little more accessible than a sit-down restaurant. Maybe we find that sitting at the bar at a diner is a little more accessible than sitting at a table because we can come and go a lot more easily from that environment, whatever the case may be. And again, being mindful of those time limits. And we want to adjust as our loved one is able, and that may require us to get creative. So, for example, if we know that they loved to walk in the park, but they just can't keep up with that walk anymore, we're going to bring a wheelchair. We're going to bring a walker. We're going to bring a folding chair, something that they can take frequent breaks on. We may eventually get to the point where we're not walking the park anymore. We're just walking to the park and finding a bench to sit on, and we're people watching and feeding birds and just chatting while we enjoy the park without necessarily walking through it. When that no longer becomes an option because the drive is too much or the time it takes to get there is too much or whatever the case may be, then maybe we're taking them out to the courtyard or to their backyard or to sit on the sidewalk. I know at our community, we have a group of ladies that has taken to, when the weather is nice, they just sit out on the front sidewalk every night with a bag of dog treats and they just people watch. And as people in the neighborhood walk their dogs past, they engage the dogs, they give them treats, they get to talk to people, and they have a really good time. And those are people that used to love to go out and be social. And now we've kind of found a new way for them to do that, just with whoever happens to be passing by. That's a great example of how we can adapt it, kind of across the cycle. Same for restaurants. Maybe you start out with a favorite restaurant and then we work our way to more quick serve options, fast food options. Maybe we set up a picnic or we set up takeout. If you really want to make it feel special, you can still, set the scene, set the table so that it feels like a restaurant, but in a more comfortable setting, whatever that takes. If you're going to a special occasion, I find that these are some of the most challenging types of outings for our families. When their loved ones have dementia, maybe you're going to a child's or a grandchild's birthday party or a wedding or, a memorial service, something to that effect. where you really feel it's important to be there for certain parts. Nobody wants to miss the grandchild blowing out the birthday candles or opening the presents. But if your loved one is struggling and they've hit the wall before it gets to that time, staying may make it worse, not better. And they aren't necessarily going to understand, oh, we just need to stay for 10 more minutes. You might say that and they say that's fine, but they don't have a concept of what 10 minutes looks like. And they're getting progressively more frustrated, and nobody wants to ruin the child's birthday party. Certainly nobody wants to make a scene at the wedding or at the memorial service, that sort of thing. And so if that's the case, maybe you want to arrive a little later to the event so that they can be there for that important part. Maybe you want to have a backup plan and let the host know we may need to leave a little early. Can you take pictures? Can you video it for us? That sort of thing. Maybe you have another loved one on standby. If it's, I don't know, if it's your first grandchild's first birthday and you want to bring mom, and mom hits the wall before you get to watch your grandchild, smash into that cake for the first time. I can totally understand not wanting to leave in that moment. But if your mom needs you to, maybe you have somebody else, another family member that's familiar with them and that they're comfortable with on standby who is willing to leave and miss that, who is going to be content with just seeing pictures or just seeing video. A family friend, somebody that can swing by and grab them to help in that moment. That's okay. It might mean taking 2 cars and needing to leave at separate times, whatever the case may be. Those are always options. One of the things that we want to keep in mind is that there's a lot of ways to adjust the situation. So it might look like going to the drive-thru and getting ice cream and then sitting in the parking lot and eating it in the car, as opposed to, going to Friendly's and having that whole day. And that's okay. I know we have a lot of families that'll bring favorite treats and favorite coffees, and sit and have a little coffee shop experience right on site, right in their loved one's room. And that's okay. Those still count. It's kind of counterintuitive because it doesn't seem like an outing at that point when you're not actually taking them anywhere, but it's still a mental outing. Our loved ones are masters of mindfulness. They are truly living in the moment at every moment because that's all they can do. And so that's still a treat for them. It's still a departure from the norm for them that does feel special and that is reminiscent of being able to get out and about in the community, even if they've progressed to such a point where they're not able to anymore. And so on the events, big important events, I had started to take it creative, and I just remembered I have a phenomenal example of this. We had a family once that really wanted their loved one to be at the wedding, granddaughter's wedding, but they knew that that was going to be entirely too overstimulating an environment, and that it was going to be distracting for pretty much everyone involved, that it would really detract from the event. The bride and the groom want to be involved in their day. They don't want to be worried about what's happening to grandma, that kind of thing. Mother of the bride, father of the bride, mother and father of the groom want to be able to attend to their children, not necessarily to their parents' needs. And it's beautiful if you're able to manage that, but it's not necessarily, you're not necessarily robbing them of something if you can't. And so some options that we've had people do is that you hire an aide to come with you for that event so that they can be present, but you have somebody there that can take them to the bathroom when you can't step out of the ceremony, or when you don't want to miss that first dance, or whatever the case may be. We did have one family that did a wedding brunch, which was a really beautiful thing. So they had their wedding day. They scheduled a separate breakfast just for grandma to attend. And the bride and groom wore their, their dress and their tux. And the key family members that they, that were involved, like the flower girl, some of the bridesmaids wore their dresses too. And so all the close family members were there. And it gave them an opportunity to show off that wedding regalia, to have their grandmother be involved, and to take photos that she was involved in. And that resident came back and had photos of the beautiful wedding and she had no idea that she had just gone to breakfast with her family. For her, she had really been at the wedding. And so fortunately, the brain fills in the gaps. She's been to enough weddings. She saw the dresses, she saw the tuxedos, she had the pictures. The brain filled in the gaps and knew what transpired. And so it was a best case scenario for everybody. They got their beautiful day. They also got to have her involved, and she got to feel as though she was included. That's really going above and beyond, but it's a beautiful thing if you can do that. Any thoughts, questions about any of this?
This is really an outstanding slide of information as loaded. I know that 2-hour time slot that you said, that really does seem to be true, I think, but I never really thought of including the getting and coming back from something like all that 2 hours. But I have seen that itchiness with my mom, and starting to go all through my daughter's house towards the sundown time, because I don't know what she's looking for, but they're looking maybe for home, even though when she gets back to her apartment, she's, oh, this is where I live. But it is funny, it's really true. And I think that 2 hours sometimes is very true. I see it with my mom. So but so many things to consider. It's really very good.
Well, good. I'm glad. Yeah. I don't know what it is about the 2-hour window, but it seems like every family that I have that takes their loved ones out consistently, they'll just randomly hit a wall where they're like, seems like she wears out at the 2-hour mark now. and it's only 2 hours. And so I don't know what it is about that length of time. But if you know that,
but just finding
work with it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, finding a piece of an event to become a part of that, that's a really great idea.
Mm-hmm. Well, good.
And after, like you said, a brunch afterwards or whatever it is, that's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad that it's helpful. Right. And so that's kind of it for today. If you have any other questions or comments, any other topics that you'd like to discuss, we can plan for another meeting.
Not at this time. You've covered so many very important topics. I can't think of anything else now.
Oh, okay. Well, so I do have an announcement to make, and so you'll be kind of on the first receiving end, and you may or may not have noticed this in your time in the community, but I am expecting twins in September. So yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, so thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And so the reason that I bring that up here is because it's really important to me that this does not fall off when I go on maternity leave. And so of course, pregnancy in general and with the nature of multiples is even more unpredictable. I'm hoping to stay through till mid-September. It's possible I go out sooner than that. But I'm hoping to either have some of my fellow tapestries directors come in and do guest presentations, or to pre-record some topics so that we can still have these meetings once a month, so that we can still, cover whatever needs you might have, whatever concerns might be coming up, or whatever topics we realize we're kind of struggling in. And so the sooner I can get started on that, the more likely it is to stay consistent, because I really don't want this, this form of support to fall off during my absence. So if you can put on your thinking cap and come up with any, any topics that might be helpful, I'm going to start working on those presentations ahead of time. Whether that's that I'm working on them and pre-recording them and having them be released once a month, or whether that's that I'm lining up one of my colleagues to step in and perform, for me, so that we can make sure that we keep it moving. So, so just kind of have that in the back of your mind if you notice something going on with mom that, that kind of tickles your brain in a place. Write it down, let me know, and we'll go from there, because the more topics I have, the better off we'll be. And I figure if I get too many suggestions, it just means I'm covered for when I come back. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, well, that's so exciting. The twin, my husband's a twin, but um so it's an awesome thing when they grow up, I can tell you that. And yeah, so okay. Well, thank you very much.
thank you.
It's it's really a privilege for us that you do this, because I wish I had this instruction many years ago, and I'm saving all of your and filing, online these presentations, because they're just very helpful for a lot of friends, whether they're living in a residence, a community, or if they're just at home. It's just so much good way of thinking, positive way and creative way of thinking, with this particular group of people.
Oh, well, thank you so much. That makes me really happy. So I don't know if you saw, but we recently added a YouTube playlist to our United Methodist Communities channel just for these videos.
Um,
So I know, like,
oh,
so I send out the recordings every month, but that might, if you do have friends or family that you know of that are going through this, for themselves, that you think might benefit from it, you can also just direct them to
okay.
the YouTube channel. And I'll make sure when I send out the recording and the slides of this, that I'll include that link as well, so that you have it, on standby. It's great to be able to go back and reference something that we've talked about before, or to be able to pass it on, to someone who might be going through the same struggle and maybe be at a different stage. Even like I said, when we're educating family members or friends that don't spend a lot of time with our loved one, like, hey, before you come and visit, maybe check this out, kind of a thing.
Right.
And a lot easier
It's
than remembering all of the Zoom links and Zoom passwords to access the recordings, for sure.
yeah, yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. It's a nice benefit from say it Pittman there.
Well,
Okay.
thank you very much. Have a great night, Beth.
Too.